What are Democrats thinking right now? I don't think they're doing much thinking. Just blame Republicans, blame conspiracy theories, and enjoy being completely politically irrelevant. Because once you get displaced from power, we're not going to give it back. Republicans controlling, Republicans winning over Hispanics will be the nail in the coffin. We're not going to give that power back.
We're never going to give power back. For those that don't know, Charlie Kirk has multiple personalities. He's a very thoughtful and intelligent debater on his debate show, very civil. And then he does these lunatic podcasts where he's a completely different person, saying the most ridiculous things imaginable. I also want to point out how dishonest American partisans are and how they keep moving the goalpost. Remember a time not so long ago where we were told if the Democrats win, we're never going to have another Republican in power ever again? That is what the right was saying then. An absolutely absurd statement. Now we're rapidly heading for a red wave, and he's proudly pronouncing that they're going to get in power and they're not going to give it back, which of course is the exact opposite of what was presented in 2020. I want you to also take note of the detail, and it's a pattern of behavior of just blind ignorance in this country. Whether you're left or right doesn't really matter. The partisans in this country are the real problem, right? Because they're so tribal that they cannot think rationally and logically. They're slaves to their tribes. And the rest of us who live in reality and are not in tribes have to suffer the consequences of this behavior, being so vulnerable to being manipulated by people like Charlie Kirk, Al Sharpton, David Pakman, Tim Pool, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Jimmy Dore, Tucker Carlson, and Jackson Hinkle. The pattern that I'm referring to is you have people saying crazy things like this, getting dismissed. Oh, he's just being hyperbolic. He's joking. He's not being serious. And then we eventually find out that they actually were serious and some craziness happens and everyone's kind of like, oh, I didn't see that coming. January 6th was not a surprise. Just like how he's talking openly and saying these crazy things, many crazy things were being said that made it pretty clear that something like January 6th was about to happen. But it was dismissed. Charlie Kirk will be dismissed. And then when Republicans do some craziness, again, it's going to be, whitewashed, downplayed, willful ignorance. I want you to take note that when these statements were being made by the right, that if we allow Biden to win, we're never going to have another Republican president. That was the right wing that was fear-mongering to their base, trying to scare them to the polls, right? The folks on the left were not claiming they're going to take power and never give it back. They didn't say that, right? That was the right fear-mongering to their base, trying to scare them to the polls because they didn't think that they had a platform. They didn't think that they had policies that were enough to motivate enough people to go to the polls. So they had to resort to fear tactics. And now that they're about to be in power, they are making the same claim of themselves. The things that they were trying to fearmonger their base was they were saying these fraudulent Democrats are going to steal the election and then they're going to get in power. They're going to rig the system so that we'll never have another Republican president. Now they're openly saying we're about to take power and we're going to do the thing that we were scaring you that the Democrats were going to do. But of course, if you're on the right, that's not the way you're going to interpret it. You're going to just interpret it as, oh, he's just being hyperbolic. He's just being silly, right? Just like how the people that were saying storm the Capitol before they stormed the Capitol were just being hyperbolic. Just like how all the talks of civil war, they were just being hyperbolic, right? And then we see police officers fighting for hours, defending the Capitol, dozens ending up in the hospital. And an entire Republican Party that's not even willing to say those words. All you can get from them is, well, it was a bad day. It should have never happened. Those guys that did violence, they should suffer consequences. That or concern for these criminals who attack police officers who are in prison now. Concern for how they're being treated. No concern for the many in prison who shouldn't be in prison, right? Because we've been doing that for decades. No concern about those people. Falsely accused people in prison. No concern about them. All the prison rapes, no concerns about them. They're concerned about criminal scumbags who attack the Capitol of the United States of America, assault police officers, put them in a hospital, and now they're in prison, being framed by people like Green as, they were just simply trespassing. They're being treated unfairly. Right.
We're going to win 80 to 100 seat pickup in the House of Representatives. We're going to win the Senate. We're going to win school boards. We're going to going to thread these Soros-backed DAs. We're going to win state legislatures. We're going to win all the secretaries of states that are running. We're going to win the governorships. We're going to win the state legislatures. This is going to be a massive blowout like 1932. You're witnessing right now a political realignment like 1932. And we will govern for 100 years after we win 100 seats. You saw it last night.
Do you want to govern as a one-party kind of total government? Do you want to destroy the Democratic Party?
I believe that we will destroy the Democratic Party as a...
Do you want to destroy the Democratic Party? No. Actually, we want to destroy the Democratic Party.
national political institution. You'll have...
No. We don't want to destroy the Democratic Party. We just want to destroy the Democratic Party. Insane. And of course, no one on the right is concerned that a lunatic like this is one of the leading voices that has power politically on the right. I almost feel like partisans on the left and the right, they don't really care about how corrupt these politicians are. I don't see the Republican Party ever going too far that their base is like, oh my goodness. The Republican Party could team up with a gang, right? Team up with the Bloods, using them to do canvassing. And I'm pretty sure the base would find a way to explain how that makes sense. Oh, well, you know, I'm just focusing on the fact that they're gangsters, but they're citizens as well, right? And it makes sense to deal with these people who are within the community, who are at the very bottom, right? They have an ability to reach out and get people to the polls. And I'm just too focused on the fact that they're gangsters and murderers and criminals. I mean, am I wrong? Could you comment right now, name a group that is so corrupt, so disgusting, that if the GOP was somehow affiliated with them, that it would be a massive consequence to them. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on that one. Because from what I'm seeing, there is no bottom to the people who vote for folks like DeSantis and Trump.
Have the Squad and the Progressive Party, and you'll have the neoliberal neocons that the January 6th committee is. You'll have Liz Cheney on one side and Kinzinger, and you'll have Shifty Schiff and Swallow on the other. A neoliberal neocon that represents Wall Street. A populist uprising of Hispanics, African Americans, and working class people in this country is before us.
And this is what you call genius level propaganda and manipulation. Lying with the truth. Pointing out some very valid truths and issues that we have in this country. The elites against the people. But then presenting the solution as people who are also part of the elites. Also a massive part of the problem. And in fact, presenting people as a solution who would make the situation far worse than it already is. Knowing that many of Americans won't pick up on that and they'll fall for this. They will connect with the truths that he's saying. They will get energized by the idea of a populist uprising. The people standing up against the elites. They'll get caught up in that narrative and participate in the destruction of their own country and the furthering of the very corruption that they are concerned with. Use the people to destroy themselves, to further enrich yourself and gain more power. Right.
Speak at this very moment, there is realistically one dominant political party, regardless of whether or not the politicians have a D or an R at the end of their name, right? The corporate wing of both parties that is the dominant political power in this country. And
100%. And one of the ways that they are able to wield this power is by fooling you into thinking that they are so different. It's the evil Democrats. It's the evil Republicans. Unlike us, they want to destroy this country, right? Anyone could make that statement. That could be someone on the left saying that or someone on the right saying that. They're using the exact same arguments to manipulate and pacify the people so that we can be distracted with each other while they consolidate power and wealth at our expense. This is what's happening in this country.
It's been that way for decades now. Americans have experienced a significant decline in their quality of life since the 1970s as a result of that neoliberal policy that is in fact shared and favored by both corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans. Again, put them together, that's the dominant political party in this country. And we're at a crossroads. Look at the similarities between where the United States and really the world is right now, where developed countries are right now versus where things were, after the during and after the Great Depression. We were at a crossroads. The reason why Roosevelt implemented his New Deal was, yes, because of pressure from labor, but also because, and he said this, he was very transparent and candid about it, we need to save capitalism, right? If he didn't intervene the way that he did with the New Deal, with serious social spending, well, fascism was rising. That was a huge threat. Calls to end capitalism were rising. He was concerned about that as well. And I'm concerned that we don't have an FDR type leader to pull us out of the possibility of just devolving into a fascist state.
Yeah. Very, very valid concerns. I've recognized in the last few years that we have many, many, many Americans who say a lot of things that can distract you. But if you read between the lines and you pay attention enough to what they're saying, you will recognize that currently there is a high level of comfort with the idea of an authoritarian rule. Case in point, you had Donald Trump, who idolized leaders like this, who idolized governments where the leader could unilaterally just rule, say things without any pushback, not having to make a case and build relationships and that sort of democratic process. He liked the idea of being able to rule as a king. A man who likes the idea of ruling as a king is even now, currently in 2022, benefiting from a massive level of support by half the country. A man who tried his best to dismantle the little safeguards that we do have in our government. Frustrated with the fact that he can't just do what he wants to do. There's a process and they have to vote and it has to be approved. Annoyed with democracy. And this man is currently highly supported. And in fact, he's basically running an entire political party as a civilian. That is where we're at in this country. Someone who is so extremely anti-American is massively supported as a cult of personality and demagogue, Donald J. Trump. This sends a message to some very, very evil people and powerful people and wealthy people that current America in 2022 is ripe for takeover. Now is the time to push for fascism. There is a massive appetite for that by millions of Americans in this country. You say that to them, they will say otherwise. But again, Trump wanted to rule like a king. And these people will say all kinds of things. But if you ask them how bothered would they be if Trump was able to find a way to eliminate all of these processes that were stopping him from doing his agenda? Basically, removing all the safeguards. Ask these same people how concerned or outraged that they would be if Trump had gotten to a point where he accomplished this, where he could basically do whatever he wanted and nobody could stop him. I don't think many of them would be super bothered. They may pretend, they'd be like, well, I wouldn't stand for that. But the reality is, this is not something that scares them or terrifies them or they would be outraged by. In fact, I mean, they sat by and watched him try to do this by firing a bunch of people. The people that were there put in place to constrain the power of the president. That's how our government was built. Someone who is all about the Constitution and the Founding Fathers would respect that these safeguards were put in place for a reason, because we didn't want to be ruled by a king. We left Europe for a reason. We came here to form what we believe to be a better form of government. And those who are so just, it's almost like they worship the history of this country and the Founding Fathers and the Constitution, and it's religious for them. But yet something that is so sacrilegious to that, no concern. What would the Founding Fathers think about Donald Trump dismantling the very system that they put in place to avoid someone just like Trump?
The so-called mainstream media is on one of those three sides, and it's super clear which side they're on, the corporate side. And so they will pretend that there's a real difference between Democrats and Republicans on a couple of social issues and identity politics and culture wars. There are, so they focus on those as both sides agree to rob us blind. Totally. What's the only thing that's passed in the last 20 years? Tax cut after tax cut after tax cut for the rich.
And defense spending, increased defense spending over and over again, which benefits a small group of corporations that make products for the military.
And deregulation,
Right.
which is, hey, buy any media company you like, buy the tech companies, you get larger and larger and larger. Do not protect your workers, do not protect the American citizens, etc. And corporate media never tells you that Republicans and Democrats agree on economic issues. They never tell you that they're robbing us blind and destroying your livelihoods. They are. We're gonna do a story later in the show about how we are drowning in medical debt. Do you see that in mainstream media? They never talk about it. Instead they say, oh, you're gonna get rid of your private insurance. As if private insurance is good. Why? That's their advertisers. That so-called mainstream media are giant billion-dollar corporations helping other giant billion-dollar corporations by pretending that their marketing is news. It isn't news, and it's destroying this country.
The other thing I have to bring up is the fact that really Democrats are asleep at the wheel when it comes to the dismantling of our democratic process. Story that barely gets any attention. In New Mexico, the county's Republican-controlled Board of Commissioners has voted unanimously to not certify last week's primary elections. They're refusing to do it. And so the Supreme Court in the state, New Mexico Supreme Court, has stepped in and demanded that they certify the election by Friday of this week. One member of the board was actually present at the Capitol riots on January 6th. And so
none of this is going to cause any outrage on the right because of the very same reasons that I pointed out earlier. They will push back and deny their comfort with us heading in a authoritarian direction, but they are actually very, very comfortable with that. So the idea of some state, as long as it's in their favor, right? The idea of a state just refusing to certify an election, whatever. Now, if Joe Biden makes a speech and says nothing crazy, just says, we need to make sure that gay and trans people get treated with respect and love that they deserve. They're Americans. All Americans should be treated fairly. Something like that. You would see a lot of folks on the right outraged that, oh my goodness, this woke thing, and while inflation's going on, Biden's talking about trans people. But a state refusing to certify an election? Well, trans swimmers. These folks openly tried to steal an election. While part of that process involved making false claims that the election was being stolen from them, quietly ignored all the people on their side who got arrested and charged for election fraud, wasn't covered by right-wing media. The individuals who were complaining about the election this, the election that, didn't have anything to say about it. They don't care. So many people arrested and charged with election fraud. Not a peep from Crowder, not a peep from Shapiro, not a peep from Tim Pool, right? Not a peep from Newsmax. That is how you lie with the truth. I'm not going to lie about how many people actually committed fraud and were on the Trump side. I'm just not going to talk about it. And instead, I'm going to talk about all these accusations about the left stealing it and Democrats stealing it. And by me doing that, I'm going to make you create the lie in your brain, because by me giving you selective information, you're going to come to the conclusion that the election is being stolen by the Democrats. Now, if you knew all the facts, you might not come to that conclusion, but that's the point. Using truth to lie. That is what partisan independent media does. That is what partisan corporate media does. So this is the path that we're heading down, and it's very obvious. And just like in 2016, where Americans put their head in the sand, just like in 2020, when Americans put their head in the sand, Americans are continuing to do this. Whatever happened on January 6th did not end on January 6th. It's still happening right now. It's expanding. It's getting better. It is spreading throughout this country like a virus. Right? They're putting in place all of these dishonest partisan actors in position to be able to flip things in their favor if things don't go their way. Is there an outrage coming from any large group on the right? No. With tribalism, the only thing that matters is that your side wins. It doesn't matter what they do to win. It doesn't matter how they win. It doesn't matter how bad your side might be, whether you're on the left or the right. The only thing that matters is that your side wins. And when people present you with ugly truths about your side, your response, whether you're on the left or the right, is going to be, what about what your side is doing? Right. This is the Debate Me channel. Debate Me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.